Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's roundtable, Tomorrow's Life Science Workforce session. Today we'll be talking about integrating biotech facilities and training. And at this time, I will introduce Joanne Geer. She is the Executive Director of Westchester Biotech Project. Joanne?
Thank you, Denise. You could go on to the next slide, please. I'm going to introduce Carla Romney in just a moment, but Westchester Biotech Project was founded in 2017, and this roundtable, which really brings educators and employers together, got started about that time. And I'm going to let Carla introduce herself in a moment. She's co-chair of our career consortium, and this group has created the curriculum for our Westchester Certificate on Essential Skills in the Lab. Carla, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Denise. It really is an honor and a privilege to be here again. I have been working with Joanne almost since the beginning in 2017. And we had a number of conversations, and I raised the point very early, in fact, at that very first meeting, saying, well, it's great to bring people together, but what we really need to think about is how we build the pipeline of talent and how we can nurture a biotech workforce in Westchester, the Hudson Valley area. I mean, depending on how you want to define that, but in Metro New York area. And in bringing together educators and employers from large and small biotechs and pharma companies, as well as the 2- and 4-year schools in the area, it really became apparent that there really is both an interest and a need to think about these issues. And that led to the creation of the Career Consortium as sort of an arm under the Westchester Biotech Project. And as Joanne mentioned, the signature piece that we're really excited about to finally have it coming to fruition in person in August at Westchester Community College is the certificate. It is a 5-module course, like mini course, if you will, that gives students both hands-on technique in the lab at WCC, and that's obviously why we haven't been able to do it through the whole COVID era, because it just wasn't sustainable to bring people into labs that were not students with COVID testing and other requirements on campuses. But the 5 modules really are designed to give people, whether they're young people who are in high school or early career, returning veterans, adults who are career transitioning, to give them the vocabulary and the basic skill set of an introduction to what it means to work in the biotech workforce. And so we're really excited. We have a number of registrants for this. We're capping it just because of the lab capacity issues that we face at Westchester Community College. But I can't wait till August to actually have this come to fruition. And it's been a wonderful journey to get to this point, and I'm excited to see it move forward. Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you, Carla. This is really wonderful, and we've had interaction with, at that first roundtable, there were 7 colleges and 5 companies represented, and everyone around the table agreed that this was important to do. So we're very happy that it's getting on its feet. So go to the next slide, please. We really are thinking about what is it that we can do to have an impact on the whole workforce continuum, which includes, of course, all the educators, but also burgeoning companies as well. And that really we have to face all of the questions we've all been facing for the last several years. Obviously, the COVID environment has created great challenges, but also some incredible new opportunities, as well as really aggressively working on radical diversity, radical inclusion, and making sure that we are participating with voices from all sectors. Go ahead, please. Excuse me. So today we're going to hear from experts who've been working in this field for quite some time. First, we'll hear from Bill Deckert, then Harry Benson and Matt Oravetz, and we'll introduce them in just a moment. Continue. So you just heard from Carla. She and Ray Houston are the co-chairs of our Career Consortium, which is the umbrella organization over this session. Go ahead. Our overall mission at Westchester Biotech Project is really to bring together researchers, data scientists, engineers, and those who love them, and to stimulate cross-silo collaboration and problem solving. And we think very much about our region, which is just north of New York City, but of course it's a national and international community, and those who are involved in the sciences and the life sciences in Westchester are already collaborating nationally and internationally. So it's a really wonderful continuum. Continue on, please. So our overall thrust at this point is really to develop our Blueprint 2030. And with what we know so far, where do we need to go? You've heard about the Career Consortium a little bit, and we have several programs there. And today's program is really under the rubric of the Lab of the Future. We see a great opportunity to solve a big problem. The lack of enough, I usually say the dearth of laboratories for educators and young companies in the Westchester area it's like a water main break in the pipeline. There are about 100 companies, life science companies in incubators in the New York City area. And when they get funded and are ready to leave, there's no place for them to go. They have money, but they don't have time. So we see an opportunity for a facility that can integrate the needs of our many colleges. And Westchester has 22 colleges, SUNY Purchase, Iona, Pace, Fordham. There's a really wide range that focuses on undergraduate education at this point. There is a small number of PhDs that are awarded at several different colleges, but a very small number. There are many more PhDs who work at Westchester than who are awarded. Continue on, please. And we are very blessed to have lots of good friends. And we want to call out JP Morgan Chase, which has supported our programs for a couple of years, Montero Language Services, which is based in Madrid and is focused on translation of elite documents such as clinical research materials and intellectual property in the life sciences. So we encourage our friends to participate at this level, and we've really had a good growth over these 5 years. Continue on, please. And we just heard about the certificate, so we can continue on. And these are some of our upcoming programs, and they're all on the website. We welcome you to participate, and you'll see it's a rolling process of choosing our speakers. So if you see an event you'd like to be a speaker at, certainly be in touch with us. Continue on. At this point, I'm going to introduce Bill Deckert, who for a long time was at Commissioning Agents and is now has his own organization, Capital Services. Bill, take it away.
Thank you, Joan. Let me I'll share my screen. Okay, hope everybody can see my screen. And so I took a little different look, and just a background for me. I've been designing, building, qualifying biotech pharmaceutical facilities for about 40 years. So retired from CAI back April 1st, and still actively involved with a lot of companies where act as a consultant, helping them take their products to market and all the way to the patient. So I think when you see the details that I've been involved with, it's been from startups, it's been large biotech pharmaceutical facilities. But today, I want to talk kind of to your audience about how to really get from understanding a biotech facility and into the training, but also into how those students actually become employees, what to look for, and how to kind of indoctrinate themselves so that the workforce is, I'll say, hireable. Okay, so because it's not whether you've got your 4-year degree, Dylan, or anything like that. It's the knowledge that you gain along the way. And I think when you see through this pieces, you're going to see there's different things to look for and questions for you to ask. So I'll kind of get into the meat of it. So what types of companies would you want to work for? And I'm going to kind of address this to Dylan. So, and Dylan's like, well, I'll work for a biotech company. But I want you to understand that, is the company really interested in creating saving drugs, right? Okay. Because there are some companies that are truly interested in building up their reputation and portfolio so that they can be purchased or bought out. So now you have to kind of ask those questions. Like, what type of companies are these? Are they driving to just build up and get bought out? Or are they really trying to create new drugs that are life-saving? So these are different questions as you ask to different people, as well as you're recruiting them into the Westchester area as well. What is their end goal? So that's a big piece. Then, there's two distinctly different companies. How they operate and how they react to growth and change are vastly different. So just kind of, that's an announcement to kind of say, be careful of what you're going for, or at least know what you're going for, because it's a different situation with each type of those companies. So then I talked about really, what are the facilities? What's the type of equipment, right? If you're a student or you're somebody that's looking to be employed, you kind of have to understand how they're put together. So you need to understand what's the installation, what's the sequence of installation, what's the sequence of qualification. If the project is going to, be 1 year in being built, understand and know what's happening at that company, understand what the critical utilities are versus the black utilities. These are, and somebody goes like, oh, I don't care, I'm just working in the lab. But I'm suggesting as part of my presentation that you need to look around, not just to what you're doing, but what other people are doing, so that you learn and expand your horizons out so that everybody gets an understanding. So I might tell you that, here we're talking about boilers and pure steam generators, chilled water systems that are out there. You need a purified water system. Well, why do you need a purified water system? Because you can't have WFI without a purified water system. And the water in a WFI system is a continuously moving. You need steam. So now we go back up to the boilers. We need boilers before we can have WFI. We need stainless steel tubing that's orbital welded. And then there's going to be bioreactors, and some of them are jacketed. Some of them need heat. Some of them need cold. So you're going to have temperature control units. And so, as I state, that what you're doing is not just doing the test, the lab test. You have to understand the facility. Are these class A, B, C, D type of clean rooms? What drives the cleanliness levels? You can get copies of the documentation that tells you why they're doing that. There's a risk assessment that's done. And then what are the gowning requirements? Are you going to be required to wear gowning every day? These are questions you need to ask as you're going in for employment and have a good understanding. And is the product being made, is it required for cold storage? Or are you going to be going in and out of cold storage every day? So it's not just, hey, I went to company, they hired me, the rest of that stuff. I'm pressing everybody to say, try to get a good understanding of exactly what it is that the work process is. And now, at the end, the clean rooms are pretty easy to build and design, right? But it's how we get the people in there and how we actually interact with the product that makes the big difference. And I'll tell you that I did a lot of work with Warp Speed, getting a couple of sites up in the last 3 years. It was very, I'll say, intense, and a lot of hours, a lot of endeavor to move things. But I'll even say, even from our own group, that one of the issues that I had was actually resumes. And somebody goes like, what do you mean resumes? So we would have, I'll say, young, maybe first year level people coming into the site. They were very skilled, but their resumes would never lend you to believe that they were as skilled as they were. So what I'm asking you to do is, don't just list your positions in the jobs that you're working on. List what you've learned. So let's take Dylan for today. Oh, you learned something about different companies, the rest of the stuff. These are the notes that you want to incorporate into your resume, so that as you're talking to people, it's not just the jobs that you held. Oh, I was a lab tech. what did you do as a lab tech that you learned, and then the biggest thing is, what did the people teach you along the way, and how has that happened? Then do some research, find out the company leadership that you're going to go to work for, look them up on LinkedIn, find out what their likes are, their dislikes. You have to kind of do your homework to get a good feel for exactly how the company's going to work, how the personalities are going to work, and how you're going to fit into that group along the way. And so understanding, and everybody goes, oh, I understand, is more than just about something, right? She's like, oh, I understand. Everybody tells me, I understand. But I'm just telling you that understanding is being able to use the knowledge and the experience to support your own growth and then your company's growth, but also to be able to teach others. And so if you can teach others, then you can grow because you can backfill yourself as you grow through the system. So that's my presentation today. I still have a lot of knowledge about how to design, build labs, biotech facilities, and I'd be happy to answer any questions along the way. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Bill. And I do have lots of questions, which I will save until our roundtable. Harry, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, I got to unmute, but Bill, I think, there we go. Okay.
Sorry.
No sweat. All right. So let's, and I'll be keeping the share and showing Matt's slides as well. So thanks, Bill. It's a good, it marries very well with what I'm going to cover. What I'd like to discuss is really the workforce and the preparation for the workforce and the urgency of it and the importance. And just a quick check, you're not seeing the panel with the pictures, right? You're only seeing the slides, correct? Are we good? Everyone? Okay.
Yes, good.
All right, thank you. Here's a problem statement for you, for the industry as a whole, and certainly in the greater New York area, no question, right? We see the number of life sciences professionals booming, right? You look at the graduation rates and all these other things, booming. But the need is outpacing that even still, no question. So, I mean, look at the second point here, which is that, the unemployment rate for this type of, it's a broader category in the statistics we have, but still 0.6%. I mean, the general unemployment rate, of course, is under control, if you want to call it that, in the U.S. But boy, 0.6 is not under control. That's a crisis, frankly, especially in an area that's growing and getting massive infusion of capital, as many of you have already mentioned. So, and here's the problem statement as we see it, or as I see it anyway. We use a term called operational readiness. You're trying to get this in operational excellence, right? You're trying to get this plant or lab or whatever to be like this blue curve. You want to put out exactly what the market demands in released product or in laboratory results or what have you, right? You have this pace that you have to hit sustainably, but this is what really happens to businesses, labs, facilities, et cetera. And, your startup date is late, the project expands, you got more and more frustration and issues, and it's hard to hit your stride. Now, why is that? There's a lot of reasons, but really at the core, it's very people related, right? It's really hard when you are stretching the talent pool thin and your own people thin because you only have so many resources. And while you'd love to hire more experienced people or more capable people, they just aren't to be found. And as a result, heroic efforts to do everything in the company and everybody's burning out. You get turnover, we've all seen it, right? Now, this said, these companies, a lot of these companies also need labs. They want to transfer in new therapies, right? Or maybe these companies are going to manufacture their own therapies or whatever when they get ready to go full GMP, good manufacturing practice level, and go to the direction that Bill was going, or they contract it out. And either way, they're short on people and they're short on labs. So I'm going to touch on that in just a minute. But first of all, before we start, let's take a quick look at here's a general biotech manufacturing process of a particular company. All right, they vary, how, depending on the site or whatever. But this is, I'm going to manufacture this thing. This is actually in the CRISPR industry, if you follow what that is. And all of these are steps. They're part of the production cycle of manufacturing. Almost every one of these steps requires massive lab work. Right? And I mean a lot of lab work, right? We need those biology majors. We need those biochemistry. We need those lab people, and we need labs. Many of these folks outsource their labs. Now, these are analytical labs. These aren't development labs. Both are needed badly. We know we need research and development labs. We know that, and those are continuing to grow. We also need analytical labs. Just to get product out the door. And here is a complementary example of all the things that lab analysts do along that same path of biotech manufacturing. So I bring this to the table because I don't want everyone to think, okay, it's all about research and development. That's huge. It's great. I mean, with the infusion of capital and all that, we need more people doing that, no question. And that's probably a wonderful opportunity for Westchester and the surrounding labor pool. But it's also, you need labs in biotech and biochemists and so forth for all, just to get product out to our critical products out to patients, as Bill put it. So these are just some of the things that the lab folks need to do. So what does a lab analyst look like? Again, back to some of the points Bill made. I mean, yeah, we love those people with a doctorate or 18 years of experience or whatever, and you need those, but you don't need loads of them. You need a few who can then coach these other folks coming into the industry, right? And look at this is right from a client site who feels this is, one of our client sites who does manufacturing and of lab needs EM, environmental monitoring and QC, quality control lab analysts. Look at the experience levels at the low end, right? They want, for those 3 levels, they're fine with just a little bit of experience, right? So the opportunities are there, and companies need these folks. They need smart, dedicated people. They don't necessarily have to have 20 years experience. Here's another example process, same deal. We have upstream and downstream manufacturing. This is a classic manufacturing facility, and you need QC and EM in here as well. So you need a lot of lab analysts there. But we also need operators, right? So in operators that have biochemistry or biology knowledge, it's kind of like what Bill's saying, expand your horizons a little bit. If you're an operator and you've got that, man, you're gold to these companies. Not just, just a plain, someone who can, turn a wrench, so to speak, right? Not that we don't need those too. And so what we did with one of the organizations I'm working with, very similar to what Carla's done, is we've built a GMP operator boot camp, right? And it looks like this. This is an overview, obviously. It doesn't go into the gory detail, but it's a blended learning model. Right? There's some online elements, there's instructor-led, there's hands-on practice in labs, and then there's the review and discussion. It's a cycle, and you continue, right? And here is what the curriculum looks like in a real high level, just the topics and the exercises, right? We've built this for a region. I'll go ahead and share it. It's the state of Ohio, just so you know, who is trying to do this for GMP operations because they need that for economic development, because they have more and more plants coming in, and they need to continue that, right? And this is very analogous to the lab programs that you have, Carla, and developed for SUNY and so forth. So it's wonderful to see the kind of the shared conclusions, right? And what I like best about this is you can take you can take individual cohorts of classes, and you can customize it or tier it or whatever, but you can also look at how the journey goes. Someone goes through this program to become an operator. Eventually, they might be a supervisor. Maybe they go through the program to be an initial lab tech, and they become an analyst someday. And you get the whole point, right? Maybe they're an EM tech, and they become an analyst. Some maintenance technicians become engineers. warehouse and supplies staff become supervisors, right? There's a journey here. It's not just, okay, now you're stuck in this job, right? There's so much need for growth, and they need people that'll stick with the plan, stick with the company that's growing, and become that next level of middle management and higher at some point. And that's what we're trying to get started. So that's all I had to cover. And again, it sounds like we'll save questions for the end. Matt?
Thank you, Harry. And I want to introduce Matt Oravetz, who's been a great friend to our organization from the very get-go. Matt Oravetz, go ahead.
I was going to say, Joanne, don't forget to mention, I was at the very first meeting at the Westchester County seat in White Plains.
I think you were, yep, you were.
So, okay, Harry, next slide, please. So just kind of recapping a little bit, building on what Bill and Harry talked about, some of the things that you see that are critical in this area are, wanting to grow, having an inquisitive attitude about what's going on around you. As both Bill and Harry pointed out, it's not just understanding what it is you have to do in your role. There's a real depth of knowledge that it becomes critical for success, so that you can teach anybody a procedure, but when something doesn't quite go right or according to plan, it's very important that someone has a level of understanding so that they understand the why. Why is it that this next step? Because when something goes wrong and you need to improvise a little bit, that's really what ends up being critical for success. We talked about continuous learning. I think in both instances, as Harry pointed out, there is just an extraordinarily major demand for all levels of skill. And, these are complex processes. And as we pointed out, there's room for everybody in this. There's a need for all skill levels. So it's really a terrific industry for bringing in opportunities and for engaging people and putting them on a career path for growth. And all of this, what's really exciting is to see it's driving true innovation in workforce development, and people like Carla and Harry and many others are working extremely hard to train the workforce of the future and try to get these products out to market. Next slide, Harry, please. So there's a brand new report. I don't know if anyone saw, I pulled together a bunch of slides here, and this just caught my eye. This was issued this month, a report from the New York City Planning Department and the New York City Economic Development Corporation called Life Sciences in the New York Metro. And it's a report looking at New York City and the 26 surrounding counties surrounding New York. So that includes New Jersey and Long Island and Connecticut and of course Westchester. And so you talk a lot about in business, people in high-tech industries, where there's a need for interactions between research and investors and entrepreneurs willing to take a risk and try and put product on the market. New York has all of these things in spades, and it's really striking when you look at this report what a powerhouse the New York region is. And it's the largest workforce in the country. That includes life science workers, believe it or not. It's larger than San Francisco or Boston in terms of life science talent. Anybody would know that New York is the global capital of the world for finance. And surprisingly, it's about 10% of the U.S. GDP, which is larger than Canada or South Korea. So it's just a ton of resources are available right here in the broader New York metro area ecosystem. Of course, excellent schools all over the place, a great mix of businesses, and an inventory of wet lab and dry lab spaces that are popping up all over the place. Next slide, Harry. So here's a little bit of data talking about employment here. So the left-hand bar is the number of companies, and the right-hand bar are the number of jobs. And the colors represent R&D companies. The pink fuchsia is manufacturing, and the green is diagnostic labs. And you'll see in about a 4-year period, the increase in labor employment is 18% for R&D jobs. And as Harry pointed out, the laboratory diagnostic lab space, which is sort of an ancillary area, is even faster growing than that. And the R&D jobs tend to be like we said, perhaps driven a little bit with very high education levels, et cetera, but not in all cases. The manufacturing, because this report was the broader area, the manufacturing tends to be focused more in central New Jersey or in Long Island, maybe due to some logistic opportunities for transport. But anyway, you see there's 150,000 people employed in the life sciences in the greater New York area, which is really quite impressive. Next slide, Harry. This is some data from a database that we subscribe to at our company, which is a plant level database of expansions and new construction and activity to create a new facility or expand a facility. And what I wanted to point out here, and this is the plant level data for North America that's aggregated together. And what I wanted to point out here is there's kind of something in this for everyone. The life science is really booming everywhere in North America. So there's opportunity for any region to get involved, and it's a great industry that's no longer just chained to specific geographic locations. And right now, to give you a feel, there are over 700 projects in the construction phase active, and that's over $50 billion in total value. And if you look forward beyond the ones that are, actually shovels in the ground, in the planning and engineering phase, there's even more projects, over 800 projects that are, again, right around 50 billion. And this database actually extends out further. I didn't indicate it on the slide, but there's still, if you look farther out on a planning horizon, farther out than 24 months, they're still in that range of 700 to 800. And I think it was even more. I think it was about 60 billion in sort of a planning and discussion phase. And I think it's widely known, this is extremely exciting time. There are well over 1,000 cell and gene therapies that are in advanced clinical trials right now, and the next 10 years or more are going to be an extremely exciting time for the medical industry, and all of our lives are going to change because of that. Next slide, Harry. So back to the New York area, between New York State and New York City, there are planned spending of $1.5 billion going on, and as I said, major clusters of activity are popping up. And so, why not Westchester? It's certainly happening and everywhere, and it's certainly opportunity to touch into these programs. Between the New York State and New York City, in the area, they're anticipating building 10 million square feet of wet lab space in the next 10 to 15 years. So again, the future is just so incredibly bright. As you say, Diane, planning ahead for 5 to 10 year horizon is perfect. And then I wanted to mention, there's a few areas that some of the current research is pointing to as up and coming areas, and I'm going to say New Haven bills itself as, hey, we're between New York City and Boston, and that's an advantage. And two regions that are cited as up and coming are Albany and New Haven. And so I actually thought to myself, hey, Westchester is right in between New Haven and Albany. And so again, it's really a question of finding kind of the right fit. Next slide, Harry. Okay, so I had thought about, we talked about investors and researchers and entrepreneurs. I had kind of thought about different things you need to build an ecosystem. You have to have adequate resources to thrive, and you have to be flexible about what you're trying to do, and it's got to be enjoyable, and people have to want it, and you also have to make it resilient. But Harry, I think I'm going to just skip all of these slides and just go to the end. And so, sort of my 2 cents takeaway is, you need to look at this with a holistic view. And I think, kind of the points, you want to be able to foster communication and coordination. And again, Westchester Biotech Project has been here for 5 years, doing exactly that, forcing conversations, putting people in a room, having people think about these issues and problems, and talk about it and what the shared future might look like. Also, they need to be flexible. It's a very dynamic market, and for instance, now there's so much digital technology coming along, that there may be changing amounts of wet labs versus other types of labs or infrastructure, office space that might be required, and different market segments such as cell and gene therapy or microbiome, or other things, food innovation. So there's just a ton of innovation, and at this point it's essential to be flexible, to be able to accommodate whatever the market will determine are the big things of the future. And then we've said it a couple times, the holistic view would include making this enjoyable. I think these are great careers, very desirable industry to work in. People can feel really great about working in the life sciences. There's a great opportunity here in today's world. People want to talk about work-life balance quite often. And finally, the builders and developers are very sophisticated today, and they know what attracts people, and a lot of that might be aesthetics of the facilities and clusters, and offering people places where they feel good and enjoy themselves, and also having amenities, which may sound a little silly, but these are the things that people want, and certainly make things very enjoyable. And so that's it, Denise. Or excuse me, and Joanne. I'll stop there.
Well, thank you to all of you, and that's a really good primer and overview and primer on what a career life can look like and what considerations aren't always addressed during the while you're in school. I'm going to introduce a couple of new people that have joined us, and I have some questions, but we're going to let other people ask questions first. Dylan, would you please introduce yourself and make any comments or ask any questions?
Thank you, Joanne. Hi, I'm Dylan Lasky. I'm a student at Northeastern, entering my second year. I'm studying bioengineering, and I don't know what I'm going to concentrate in, but either biomaterials or prosthetics. I have a question for Bill. Thank you for directly talking to me about the types of companies that students and graduates that come out of education, what do they want to find most meaningful in their work experience? I thought that was very interesting, and it brought to my attention that there's importance in what you pick and what you do within the field of biomedicine and stuff like that. So I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Dylan. Go ahead.
I just want to add to that. So out here at the Bio Show this week, there's a company that does 3D modeling and so forth, but they're actually doing, I'll say, replacement teeth, and they're doing them in 3D, to where they take a picture of your mouth. They have a piece in less than a few minutes that actually is not a denture, but a kind of like, and then they fit the new teeth into it that match. It's pretty amazing, and it's all done in a matter of minutes as compared to the old process. So when you said prosthetics and stuff, and then there's another one that actually does 3D modeling of body parts. So if someone's having a knee replacement, they do it while the surgery's taking place. They come out and they actually do 3D modeling of the replacement bone, so it fits exactly perfectly. And while the surgery is still going place, then the unit is ready to go. So quite interesting to see some of the developments taking place.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. I mean, some of us were focused on biotech manufacturing or biotech labs or whatever, but yeah, medical device, and like such as prosthetics and artificial organs and things like that, as well as combination products, as they call them, right, are all wonderfully growing opportunities. So that's great.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce Richard Theron. Would you like to say hello, Richard? Richard's been one of our great supporters for some years now as well.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Richard Theron with the Cernios Group. We're a vertically integrated consulting firm. We help people go from early concept all the way to commercialization, which is why we're very interested in working with groups like to work with validation and construction and commissioning of plants. I have some general questions for the panel. What we were always taught, in biotech school, is to maintain a state of control, which means, from materials to manufacturing, to release. How can you impress, pure laboratory scientists, their need, for understanding engineering? I think what you've made clear is the case that, they need to understand, the process from beginning to end. But what have been some of the approaches that you've used with your clients, to encourage laboratory scientists to take a bigger view and a more integrated vertical view, of bioprocess?
I love that question, Richard. And that is at the heart of what I do. And Bill and Matt have stories too, I'm sure, and I don't want to bore you with them. But I will tell you that to answer your question very directly, a couple of things that I do and my team does specifically is we do workshops with the job performers. They could be lab tech, a group of lab techs, maybe even QC analysts in a very specific place, or developers, or maybe they could be warehouse techs, right? We bring them in and we integrate them into the larger, we first of all look at the larger process that the site is responsible for and the outcome that they're shooting for, which is 1 million vials per year or whatever that scoreboard metric is, so that they understand where their role is in achieving that. And naturally, when you do these without the site head or the bigwigs in the room, and you do a little workshop of let's look at this process. What would you like to know better? Where do you think your gaps are? And we let them do a little exercise, and we kind of affinitize it and all that kind of stuff. And then we build, it could be anything from formal coursework to just little, seminars or one-on-ones to help raise their awareness of that. And then we do, things like plant walks, and then we incorporate that into the senior leadership's model of retention and expansion of roles. So we do that routinely now with our clients, and it's had an impact.
I was hoping that that does make a need for a CMC development, because I get paid, to cover CMC gaps at all levels, which usually include engineering.
Right.
I worked with Nielsen Dillingham Builders, which, as you know, built most of UCSD in San Diego. I hope you guys are enjoying bio. Due to illness reasons, I wasn't able to attend this week and still bemoaning that. I think that in your experience, have you had to cross-train your clients on how to cover, CMC documentation, on bioprocess? And what are some of the strategies you've used with your clients to get them to identify that, especially with gene therapy? There's one concern even Dr. Marks doesn't have an answer for, is a pooling of material for gene pool. They hate it, but they realize that gene therapy companies have no choice. So what I wanted to get from the panel is who wants to address how to cover CMC gaps in manufacturing, and how do we impress that on our clients that that's essential?
I'll ask if anyone else wants to comment on that before I.
I don't see anybody fighting with you, Harry. Go ahead.
Well, again, I think it really has to do with people understanding at all levels and what the limitations of the business are and how they might best be part of the solutions associated with that. I'm trying to think, when you think about, as you put it, risk to variability, right? If that's how we want to categorize this, everyone should have that mindset throughout the process of their work, right? Variability comes from three things, right? As if you use the operational excellence model, there's people, procedures, and plant, right? Plant being very inclusive of process, supply chain, materials coming in, et cetera. And if you don't appreciate your impact, first of all, in understanding of those variabilities, and second, the impact you have on those variabilities under using your process, right? You're selling you're selling your employees short and not giving them the tools to help you control it. We hire smart people in this industry. They're capable of learning it. Sometimes they're just not exposed to it. And again, I think the model I described is one way to do it. And it's just, you do it in all the fields of variability. I don't know if I answered your question fully, but
yeah, I would add to that, Harry, this Bill, that the way when they had me sit in the CMO seat for Amgen up in Rhode Island, and what we did is we'd have meetings for project meetings and programming meetings, the rest of that stuff, and there'd be 26 to 30 people sitting in a meeting, one person talking and 28, 29 people doing emails and so forth. So I changed the view around, and I said, all right, for every meeting we have, and they're all day long, there'll only be 7 people. One person from each group that was out there, whether, it was the process group or the IT, the rest of that stuff. But you could only have 2 meetings that you're allowed to attend a day. So obviously the management levels, like, I need to be in all these meetings, where we actually directed it to, we didn't want all the managers to be in the meetings. We wanted cross-functional from top to bottom, so that everybody that was doing a risk assessment was not a manager level, that there was people from all walks of life that were sitting into these risk assessments. And I could just tell you that the difference in a matter of weeks changed the light on the entire facility, to where they're like, oh, somebody, that might have just only started a year ago is sitting in a risk assessment with somebody that's been there for 10, 15 years. And now all of a sudden there's just a different view of, hey, did you think about this? Did you think about that? So we really focused on risk assessments and driving those answers out to the other side. So Richard, I don't know if that answers your question, but I can tell you that I'll say changing up what everyday work is seemed to be a great increase in what the output was for Amgen up in Rhode Island. So
what's interesting is that's actually it's a tried and true model of lean practices, which is Kaizen, right? I mean, you bring in those doing the work to the bigger picture and help them solve the problems or address the risks or whatever at their level, because they have the perspective of the floor or the lab or the thing that they do every day that you might lack at the director level or whatever. So great point.
That's how I write SOPs. I never, do with the template. I start interviewing people on the floor.
Nice.
First. Bill, is that a Gantt chart behind you?
No, you're the second person that asked that. But I have hundreds and hundreds of Gantt charts, but that's not one of them. It's a decoration in a Marriott hotel room.
Marriott knows its audience, right?
Yeah,
I want to
exactly.
invite. I know Carla has a time stop, so I want to invite you to say hello, Carla, introduce yourself a little further, and ask any questions or comments.
So yeah, I did have just a general comment that maybe we can all think about a little bit. As a reaction to all of the slides that were presented, and I think there's this undercurrent of recognizing the extreme lack of let me phrase it differently. The extreme need that we have to engage people in this workforce, and our challenges in doing that. We recognize that there are, there's a ton of opportunity. There are great paying jobs. There's opportunity for really changing one's life and career trajectories as a function of engagement at what, even in these, entry level type of positions with the career trajectory, that was laid out on the slides and stuff, I think is incredibly compelling. The question that I have is, how do we build interest, and how do we get people who may not have otherwise thought of themselves as like being sciencey people, right? Or engineering people, or math people, or whatever, part of that you want to think about. How do we get people to recognize that there is a place for them in this workforce, how do we communicate that message? Because I think in general, the gap is at that juncture where we don't bring in people into our pipeline. We're all trying, and our efforts are, and maybe we need to think in a different way about how we communicate about these opportunities to engage people. And as you know, my interest spans both the high school, college, early career from that perspective, but then it's also thinking about people who are retooling their careers, whether it's as a result of returning after military service or, job transitions, layoffs, other kinds of changes that happen in people's lives. And even now we're starting to see post-COVID an interest in people who retired or stepped away from the workforce under COVID, who are now with the vagaries of the stock market and other things. People are starting to say, hey, wait, I need to go back to work. How can we capture some of the talent that's out there and engage them to help fill the workforce?
Well, if I may, Carla, that was actually the entering argument for the program that I was showing, and I just showed a taste of it. Obviously, I don't want to. There's some proprietary elements to it, so I can't go any further. But we recognized you need the combination, the three legs of the stool. You need the economic development arm, which is the government, the state, the whatever. You need the educational arm, which in this case we felt was community colleges. Not a big surprise. You guys are on board with that. And not that the universities and so forth aren't needed, because there's a place for that. But community college is nimble and also reaches the wider audience, or has the potential to reach the wider audience. And then, of course, you need industry themselves, right? The industry players to say, what do I need? What will I hire? Some of the stuff Bill was talking about and Matt. So that was the entering argument. Now, how do we widen that pipeline? Because we cannot just keep pushing a rope. I mean, we can't draw from a well that's dry, right? Or that's, got some, but not high enough. So we had to widen the pipeline to available talent, to those people who never even, would look at a job for biotech and go, oh, I'm not qualified for that. Well, if you notice that just like your program, maybe, and I was going to ask you about the prerequisite program, but that's for another time, I suppose. I don't want to bore
You
everybody.
have to be 16, Harry. You might not make it.
Okay, well, there it is. Exactly. So you don't even have to spell GMP. I don't care. And by the way, let's take it a step further. So to a credit of the state of Ohio, Jobs Ohio, these folks, and BioOhio, they have, there's a stipend element. I'll just leave it at that, right? To help people with that transition, regardless of their situation. They're looking at all the factors that community colleges traditionally look at, is what are, transportation issues, childcare, the kinds of things that might be barriers to them entering that environment. And so that economic development arm has to be part of this whole model, or else it just is just academic theory, if you will, that we're going to bring people in. So, and then you get the industry now, who is very incented on providing earmarked dollars to this effort in the interest of growing the area and having a nice wider hiring pool, right? That is how this comes together, rather than, Harry or Carla putting together a curriculum and throwing it on a website, right?
I think, Harry, I want to just add one item that Carla brought up that I think is important. When she said that, I was like kind of keying on that I think it's even farther down than the college level. I think it's in the high school level. To tell you the truth, is if the state of Ohio, the state of New York, the rest of us got into the high school levels and kind of took biologic experiments and all the rest of that stuff and expanded on it at the high school level, where people were like, wow, we created something at the high school level, I think it would carry on farther, and it wouldn't be like this distraction, like, oh, I can't do that, or, I'm just interested in listening to music or reading. It's like, wow, I really like creating things. And I think that's been lost in the scientific world over the last 20 years. And it's kind of like, it'd be nice if we had those real life experiments that were taking place, whether it's a bioreactor that you wheel in, and do that at the high school level, or even, the grade school level, where they're doing, here's a test tube, you put this in, and, you have an experiment. But to me, it's way down in that level. We've got to increase the awareness of saying, wow, okay, this is what I want to do in school, as I move forward. But that's just my
Great.
point.
I agree, and it actually is even earlier. So we work with an organization called Sister to Sister International, which is a 20-year-old Westchester-based organization that's focused on getting Black and brown girls into the sciences. And really, it's middle school where people fall out, right? If they don't go into high school, ready for higher math and biology, et cetera, and are selecting themselves out already, that's a big spot. Excuse me. And the other piece of it, which we've touched on, was the whole idea of inspiration. That certain people are fascinated by the puzzle, and how does this work, and how do I make this work? But others are inspired by helping people, and the whole idea that you could play a role in your job that has an impact on the life and health of patients for many, many years to come is a concept that I don't think gets brought into 7th grade, right? Why are we learning this math? Why are we doing what we're doing today? And I'll just share anecdotally, we've seen in some of the recovery money from the pandemic that intelligently a good amount of funding is going toward inspiring faculty and giving faculty members at college level at this point that I see exposure into how the industry works so that they can start to see how they can encourage their students, prepare their students better, and so on to go to a job interview and not be intimidated, so on.
And that could be great for those middle school and high school teachers as well. I see where you're going. That's great.
Yeah, there's a as we've struggled with how to bring all these folks together, every one of those cohorts has a different culture and a different life, and many of them are finishing up their school this week and so on, so that even exploring when can we hold meetings that they can actually come to, and so on. It's a challenge, but we like to partner with organizations in that field. As our Sister to Sister has been really a great partner there. Daria, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everybody. Sorry I joined late, but the last half hour has been extremely interesting. I am a nurse and in the clinical trial arena. I've been in that for quite a while now. So it's interesting how we have the exact same challenges, the before, during, and after. By that I mean really keeping staff engaged, education, training of coordinators, the people that are really doing the on-ground work, really understanding what they need, but yet kind of being still up against the same leadership, if you would, that just does not understand what's going on inside. So where I come in is I am kind of a primary contact liaison between sponsor, CRO, and site. And where I feel like I understand the language is because I've worked many, many, many years on the site level in different capacities, including a lab. So with that being said, it's so interesting how the challenges still arise. I want to say that I think it was Harry or Bill, I'm sorry, I forgot. One of you guys talking about the actual workshops where they perform and really seeing where those obstacles lie. And that's what they're really trying to do now in clinical trials. They're trying to make this more patient-centric, really trying to figure out how protocol design can be more towards the patient and at the same time understand the impact the procedures have on the sites. So they're setting up these different simulation labs, where they actually work out they actually act out, if you would, the procedures and see where the challenges are as far as what the patient will be going through and also the staff. And then from there, they kind of debrief and dissect that and see where they can revamp into something a little more, patient and site friendly, if you would. So that it's just so interesting how the same things are really going in the same direction even before it even gets to the trial level.
Yeah.
Thank you, Daria. Daria is the
Yeah.
co-chair of our clinical research cohort, and got some great programs going on there as well. So what I wanted to ask about is, so Harry, obviously we want to bring your program to New York State. You know, we certainly, everybody loves the idea of having government funding, but of course, in our bicameral form of government, when administrations change, sometimes priorities change.
Shocker.
So
This must be the first time that's ever happened.
Yes,
I
I'm
know
sure.
you never read it. Maybe you've read about it, but it's never happened to you, right? Would you just talk about the partners? So, two things. A couple, the partners who came together to make this possible. I think you've mentioned some of them, but then also, did you create a new facility, or is this program something you do inside an existing company, for example, or you do some of both?
So it's kind of a combination of all that, but I'll get specific without getting carried away here.
Go ahead.
First of all, the economic development arm of Jobs Ohio, and hats off to them. Whether you can do this in New York, I'll leave to you. But pulling it, the governor signed off on this thing to separate it from the politics and make it its own company. It's its own company. It is not state owned, right? And CEO, all that good stuff, right? And they partner with the state and state organizations, economic development partners, et cetera, that are also independent, such as, One Columbus in the case of Columbus, right? And their job is to attract things, industries that bring jobs, right? There was an announcement recently, they brought in the biggest chip plant in history is about to be built in Columbus, Ohio, Intel. Of course, that makes it challenging for some of the other ones that come in from a labor pool, but whatever. So there is another large company in pharmaceutical is in combination products is coming to Columbus, and they decided to be a part of this, building this curriculum. They vetted it. They're going to use it, and they're going to hire from it, right? Because they see the value of that early career folks in their space. They see it and they want it. So they are investing in it. So yes, we will bring them into the program, but not exclusively. Others can participate as well. They can be speakers and co-presenters. And we will do tours. We are not taking the labs to their buildings because we don't want to necessarily go pure into one site or whatever, right? So it's going to be spread the wealth. It's also meant to go Ohio-wide, even though the first round is in Columbus. So we're working with the community of community colleges, right? Then the part of the you had asked specifically about the labs. So we're using the community colleges labs that are already there for, say, automation equipment or whatever, but also for the GMP labs. And those are not quite what we need for this curriculum. So we're using some of that funding to upgrade those and make them good GMP learning labs, right? Or and I'm using the term lab as in hands-on, but also a lab element to it, because they do have chemistry labs, right? And we can use that to help them learn some of the laboratory skills without having a degree, right? So they're going to learn the basics, kind of like what Richard was talking about. They're going to learn all they can about the things that affect patient and product and process, right? And they're going to learn it in, believe it or not, a 3-week period.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously introductory, but it's intense, and there's even some online learning they have to do in the afternoon to get terms and stuff that you don't need to sit through a PowerPoint on, and they can do it very interactive and all that kind of thing. So we're developing all of this with the economic fund engine that is funding it, such that we know the returns are going to be there in the sense of economic growth in the area. So, and job reach.
Well, that's fantastic. So I'm going to turn a little bit toward facilities themselves. So I'm going to put you on a spot, Bill. So what we've learned. So when we started the organization, our concept is we're going to start bringing people together across all the different silos. I've been kicking around the edges of this industry for a few decades, and I would talk to somebody who would tell me about their work and some problem they had. And then I would talk to somebody on the other side of the same hallway with the same work and the same problems, and they didn't even know about each other. So I thought, okay, there's a place for me. I can do something about that. And what we have found, so we did a lot, been doing a lot of bringing people together around a lot of different topics, teasing scientists out of their labs. Those are the hardest people to get to come out. And we have heard from every college and every small company we have talked to about the dearth of laboratories in Westchester area. And all of them said to us, the academic institutions, that they were not in a position to do capital campaigns for labs because of other priorities. And but if a facility existed, that they could lease it and use it. That, you know, if they can sell classes, they can rent a facility. So this is the concept that we're working with, to bring together the academic community, to help create all those, push people into the pipeline and create very much hands-on real-world experiences by combining this in a facility with companies coming out of incubators, and that still very early stage, but where they have some sort of proof of concept and some funding.
Sure.
And so it's a kind of blank slate right now, and we're starting to pull together, okay, what is it that wants to be part of the lab of the future? And obviously it depends a lot on what you're trying to accomplish, and just as simply as what kind of equipment you're going to need and so on. But the question I have for you is, you've been so engaged for such a long period of time. Can you talk a bit about how you see that process changing, and maybe foreseeing, is there a platform that's flexible enough and stable enough that we could point to today that looks like it's going to be kind of like this for a while as a platform within which change can happen? Or is there much more innovation that's required at this point?
There's certainly innovation that's required, but I can tell you that the main goal is just to get lab space for some of these startups. Okay, can they afford it? That's the tough part, and maybe the state helps out, and the rest there's grants, and you bring companies in. To me, I always wondered if there was a way to grant people money and then acquire maybe 10-20% of their stock in a new company, and so that if it ever grows to be a spectacular company, now you take that funding and put it back into more startups. It kind of like recycle the dollars. Excuse me. I'm sorry. But the state of Maryland did this as well. So they started incubators. They got space. They just simply put in the basic utilities, the lab counters, the water system, so that they were there. Incubators. They had enough equipment, and then they cycled companies in. Once they grew up, they kind of pushed them out the door and said, "Hey, you're finished, and you're moving on." And brought in new companies into that space. So
where did those companies go? Because that's what we're thinking about. There's a nice garden out there of incubators to just help people get started. Yes. But where do they go next?
Well, where they go next is literally just leasehold spaces that are available. And that's where they might get their Series A, or, to actually get some money, get some funding to push forward. Most of them, once they come out of the incubator, they're ready. They've got a product that they can at least market to the VCs that are out there and talk to them. We talked to a lot of VCs this week, and there's a lot of interest still in funding startups, especially when there's a product that has promise and so forth that's moving forward. And when you know about those, the dollars are available for people to take them. Now, it could just be in a strip mall center and the rest of that stuff where you just need space, but you need utilities, right? You need a water system. You're going to need exhaust system. You're going to have to understand whether you've got cold storage or you've got, incubators, the rest of that stuff to push through. And it's not rocket science at this point. But I would also tell you that any place that has had a lab or biologics or rest of that stuff that is shut down is still available to be retrofitted pretty easily and quickly to make it operational. And I know in New York, there's plenty of places, and down in New Jersey where they're not operating any product at the moment, and they would be accessible to move into those facilities renovated in a short period of time. But it doesn't take much to make a new lab. It takes time though, and it takes dollars.
Well, that's the piece that we're trying to help shorten. The companies we have in mind will have some level of funding, right, in order to get out of, that they can't move out of the incubator at all. So you haven't heard of anybody working on that model to say we want to create. It's not an incubator. It's the next level after the incubator where there's
there's I helped with a facility in Maryland, and literally it was just an old office building that was renovated to make 6 suites in there, so that as they came out of being a startup and wanted to work. Now, what they did is they shared utilities. They shared a water system. They shared a wet lab on the corner where people would just work their times and use it. Now, part of it takes a lot more cleaning and understanding that if one product was in there, that they're not mixing products. So they had separate glassware. They had separate utility and equipment that they would take into there. But the goal is to share utilities, because those are the big cost items that run every day and turn the lights on and so forth. But the space then becomes more optional, where you need a meeting room. You don't need a meeting room for just one company. You just schedule it, as compared to having a new lab where you're putting a meeting room in and all the offices and the rest of that stuff. So that was a very low cost facility. We had 6, I'll say, renters, all using the same water system and using the same waste handling, the same autoclave and so forth. So very good system to where they're sharing utilities. And I would say, if I was going to recommend to you, that's where I would start in this 4-story building and say, hey, let's build out some space, but let's share utilities and let's share space, whether it's the wet lab or the hoods and the rest of the stuff, to where, but cleaning is obviously the biggest piece. And Richard could help you, like writing SOPs. Part of it's that changing over. Okay, we've got a biologic product here, and now we're doing something different in there. Let's clean it up, make sure we can do that. But there's no doubt that can work out well for everybody.
So I'm going to follow up with you, because I'd love to chat with the people who made that happen.
Sure.
Because that is exactly, when we first got started, I made calls. I see you there, Richard. I'm going to call you in a minute. But when we first got started, I made calls to other communities, not New York City, not Seattle, not Boston, but parts of, so I talked to people outside in Massachusetts, New Orleans, Pittsburgh, Tucson. Everybody had a big honking goal, much bigger than what we're talking about. And they'd done the studies, and they knew who the partner should be, and they knew where their money was going to come from. And when you ask why it didn't come together every single time, it's because the people couldn't get along with each other. So we feel like if we can be part of helping the people find each other that can make these things happen, we're all grown-ups. We know there will be problems, right? But if we like working together and, enjoy the process, we're in a much better, and know each other a little bit, we're in a much better position to get through those challenges and to choose the scale. That's why I feel good about this scale. I'm glad to know somebody else has done something. That's pretty much the scale we're talking about. 6 companies would be fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And we're interviewing young companies about what would they need space-wise, what are their products, what kind of employment do they anticipate, those kinds of things. So thank you for that.
I would only challenge you to limit the space for them to start with, and have some space in the background, so as somebody that really needs it would have space available, instead of, I'll say, dividing up all your space in the beginning. It's like, we've got 6 quadrants, and everybody gets their quadrant, and then all of a sudden one of them starts to grow, and now you get pains, or they're leaving, and now you've got an empty space that's not as usable as it was to somebody else. So
yeah, I know in all the incubators that I'm aware of, 1 or 2 companies will start to take off, and they'll basically take over the whole incubator. It's a trade-off, but it's a good point you make. Thank you.
Okay.
Richard, was there a comment or question you wanted to?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm definitely interested in doing, Cernios actually is, this is not a commercial, but it's true. We are actually hiring people, but the people that we're going after are people that have been in the industry for a while. I think what's frustrating, for us is to get people to realize that they do have skills and, can go beyond, what they're going for. We have lab technicians that don't know that they're business people, or business people that forget, their science. What I think it's important when you're trying to do hiring is to try to get candidates to go beyond what their job descriptions are. I think what is a good investment is people that have been in the industry for 20 years, just got laid off. We've already invested a lot of capital and time in these people. Cross-training people makes sense rather than because they have the maturity, they've survived corporate culture, and can continue to contribute. That's why we're beginning to reach out to adults, veterans, and people that are willing to retool themselves. I used to work with a group, after the 1990s aerospace layoffs. The California Employment Development Department invested in people that wanted to retrain themselves for other careers. The people that insisted that they were going to go back to aerospace and that they were going to get picked up by L'Oreal, they stayed there, in that group. The people that were willing to retrain and cross over from aerospace into biotech and willing to relearn and willing to learn more business skills, those are the ones that got hired quickly. So I think it's up to employers to peer deeper with a microscope into their resumes and get candidates to stretch themselves. In the meantime, we should invest in young people, but we should also invest on veterans that have been in industry to get a more immediate feedback.
Yeah, Fordham, Westchester Community College, and Fordham, which is based in Manhattan but has a site also in Westchester. Both of them have very good veteran reentry programs, and it's a challenge to figure out what is with them. But now that we're hopefully being able to meet in person again and actually think together a little more, I think that some of that may come about.
If I could comment on that just briefly,
Sure.
I spend a decent amount of time with these companies, HR groups and recruiting groups, coaching them on how to post the position, Richard, to your point, because the system, that's how people find jobs these days. I mean, it's not, I go to a massive trade show and try to find, there's some of that still, but for the most part, I'm searching online and looking for keywords or whatever, right? And Dylan, I see you nodding, so you're validating my old school knowledge here. You saw some of the job descriptions, if you will, that I posted on that one slide. That was a culmination of, it was really an interchange between me and my team and their team, saying, look, okay, yeah, you want this, but what do you really need? What do you need? Right. And think about the volume of need. Yes, you need a few of those massively senior people, but how many? And you got to break down your process and figure out where you need them. And then where could you use new people to the industry, or relatively new people, 0 to 0.5 years, 0.5 to 2 years, right? Narrow it down and don't put so many restrictions. We need this, and this, or whatever. Open it up. On the contrary, make it obvious that you are interested in hearing the skills you have, not fitting the peg in the hole, right? Big difference. Yeah, thank you, Rich. That's a great point.
Thank you, Harry. So we have not yet heard from our director for the research platform, Denise. Would you like to introduce yourself and make any comments or questions that you have?
Sure. So, I'm Denise, and I feel like maybe I'm kind of a case study for some of this stuff, because I worked in big pharma for 22 years, but yet when I was in middle school and high school, I could have never imagined I would end up in a career that had anything to do with science. I didn't think I understood it. My background is actually business. But I had kind of a non-traditional career trajectory. I went to school for a medical assistant and ended up getting into Merck, and getting my degree, and I did sales and I did marketing, and you have to understand the science and be able to communicate that. So, but again, in high school, there was certainly no explanation as to what you could have done with any of this stuff. So I feel like this is all really interesting and exciting, even I think, was it Harry, you had, I think people don't understand that you don't have to have a science degree to get into the life sciences. Even in the supply chain, I think, do you need a science degree, or is a PMP certification enough? There are all these, it's just changed so much. When I got into the industry, it was big pharma, and now you have all these small companies, and there's so much opportunity, and I don't think the average person understands that at all. So
yeah, thank you, Denise. And the bing, 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 the bells are going off in my head because unfortunately, it means a new program. But if you think about the sort of, the We Want You campaigns, right? I think that there's been, I think about Bill Nye the Science Guy and all these great programs now that, children are seeing cartoons that have scientists in them, and the scientists come from all different cultures and so on. I think that I can, seeing myself piece is in the works. But the idea, no, really, we really want you.
Yeah. And you can get into this industry and really succeed. You have a great career. Yeah.
And it's almost something like, do you know how to make toast? Right? If you can make toast,
that's great.
Right? Something that to not, how do you help people not disqualify themselves?
Right.
Right.
Yes.
And because we're an intimate group today, we may cut this off of the video. I will tell you a personal story that when I was in high school, I'd gotten into the next level math when I was younger, and I really was not that interested in going on. And the highest math in my high school was pre-calculus. And I was the 7th person that qualified to take the course. And so they came to me, they said, if you don't take this course, your 6 other friends won't be able to take the course. And so will you, right? So would you please sit in the classroom, don't be disruptive, and we'll make sure that you pass. They did not say to me, we will help you and make sure that you do well. No. So I literally sat in the back of the room, and it was upstate New York. I grew up outside of Syracuse, and I graduated high school in 1972. So, I'd probably outage all of you. The Gideons had put Bibles into the classroom. Thanks, Bill, appreciate that. The Gideons had put Bibles into the classroom. So I was looking for the juicy parts in the Bible in the back of the class while, math was going on around me. And I'd look up every once in a while and, it would sort of make sense to me, but not. But just that, I went to art school, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, I won't go through all the crazy the steps that brought me here. But what did really get me here was living in Princeton in the 80s, when the big bloodletting was beginning to happen, and BMS and J&J and all the big companies, a lot of people lived in the Princeton area from those. And literally I'd meet in the coffee shop and people would start to tell me their stories, because at that point they had learned that they had to talk to anybody who would listen, because they might have to find a new life. And I'm sure, if you're familiar with that era, a lot of people retired, gone from the system forever after so much investment made. This was the beginning of the knowledge. What is it? Knowledge. Oh shoot! There was it was based.
Yeah.
What is it? Knowledge what? You know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to remember
not crisis, but something evacuation or this word. Yeah.
But there was a system that was suddenly we're killing off all these people. We need to get their knowledge first. Now it's been long enough ago, and I'm old enough to forget the name. knowledge management. And so, this was the beginning of all that stuff. And I used to tease that, the corporations were trying to teach everyone to think like women and actually talk to each other and actually, share knowledge and so on. And anyway, that whole upheaval, because it was heartbreaking in a lot of ways, because so many people with so much capability just were gone from the system, but then a very few figured out how to be entrepreneurs and start new companies, and I'm sure it's a lot of the folks that you work with. So I think that we really, and only to glide by the idea that a lot of our wonderful country is focused on hating science makes it even more important to think about how do we capture the youngest people today to say that that's a possibility for me. I don't know exactly what I'm going to be doing, but that's a possibility for me. So if there's a bigger goal in all this, and I'll just say that, unfortunately, Carla had to go. She had an NIH meeting she had to go to, but she actually was on the crew that started the whole biobus movement. And taking buses and turning them into labs and taking them to schools and so on. She's been doing that for 30 some years. So I'm going to kind of wind up now and invite everybody, if you have a final comment. Bill, I'm going to start with you. Do you have a summary note you'd like to make for our conversation today?
Well, I think we can say the world's in turmoil, but I think what we have to do is really look at from the inside and say, how do we create an avenue for not only education, but for, I'll say, the human capital part of hiring people, getting people jobs and working to create new and exciting products that are out there. And it's quite possible. The money's available, the space is available, the people are available. We've just got to find a way to get them all together. So that's it.
Beautiful. I'm going to quote you on that. Harry, do you have a final comment you'd like to make?
We talked about a lot. A good friend of mine at CAI, Cheryl Bondurant, just is about to publish a white paper on the new workforce. And as an old workforce, and as is she, our perspective on trying to understand what this new workforce expects from their employers and the market as a whole is very different. Back to your points, as you described, Joanne, and we have to avoid the old traps of telling the new folks to get in line because the wave is too big. That ain't going to happen anymore. The new incoming talent like Dylan and his peers are telling us how it's going to be. And we need to be adaptable and recognize the value because they get it. They get this whole, I work for more than just money thing. We need to figure out how to best channel that in a way that makes the most impact on patients and the industry and so forth. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity, not a dichotomy, if you will. So let's harness that. And I respect Cheryl a lot for where she's going with that. She teaches at Portland Community College in addition. And so she sees it coming in every year.
Did you say Cortland with a C?
Portland.
Portland. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, when that's available, we'd love to promote it through our channels. So, we'd be very interested in seeing that.
Yeah.
It's available. Thank you.
Thanks.
Matt, bring us home. Thank you so much for setting up this wonderful conversation and for all your support over the years. Would you like to make some final comments?
Oh, no, just to say thank you so much for giving us the opportunity, and thanks to my colleagues and friends here, and great discussion today. I think it was very valuable, and we're looking forward to some other next steps and meetings that you'll be arranging, I'm sure.
Well, thank you so much. We've just started to form a steering committee on the Lab of the Future, and we'll be engaging with some of the small companies I described, some of the larger companies, and have commitments from some of the colleges already. So we'll be coming back to you again and again, and just so grateful. Wonderful to meet you, Harry. Great to see you again, Bill. Thanks, Dylan. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Daria. And thank you so much,
all.
Denise.
Right.
Have a great day.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.